going on YouTube? So today I'm going to be talking about triggers. If nobody knows what triggers is, I'm just going to explain it a little in detail before I go on. So a trigger is something that sets you off. So for example, um, I suffer from panic disorder. So for triggers with my panic attacks are what set off my panic attacks. So for example, if I'm around large crowds for a long period of time, that's a trigger for me. People yelling and fist fighting to me is a trigger. Too much drinking and partying can also set off my panic attack, so that also is a trigger. So talking with triggers and addiction is what triggers somebody to relapse after quitting, what sets someone off to get high or drink. Triggers are something people need to master. People need to focus and make sure that they know what their triggers are, because when I didn't know what my triggers were, it was a very terrible time for me. When you understand your triggers, then you will give yourself a better life. You will give yourself a lot more relaxation in your life. You will give yourself a lot less drama. So triggers. So where do I start? A trigger is a trigger, if that makes any fucking sense. But talking about triggers with anger. For example, when you're talking about anger, what triggers you to get angry? What triggers you to get depressed? What triggers you to try to commit suicide? What triggers you to go get high? They all relate. So once you understand your triggers, once you understand what they are and what they do to you, then you kind of know what you have to do to fix it and understand your triggers, because you as a human being with your mind process, with your brain and all the funky dunky stuff, health parts, I don't know that, so I'm not going to talk about it. Once you understand them, then you will be a lot better off, because for me, for somebody to get physically hit in front of me, it's a trigger for my anxiety, but it's also a trigger for my temper. I do not like watching people get hurt. I don't like watching I don't think violence is even necessary unless you're fighting for your life. So for somebody to cause physically harm to themselves or to someone else, it really triggers me. So when I first accepted the career in social work, I came in with a lot. I was still very young. They don't really teach you about triggers and like actually what's going to happen later on in your career, and that's a true fact. When you're in school, they do not teach you half the stuff that you actually witness, the actual stuff that goes on in your career. So when I first went in, I was young. I was not even 19, I don't believe, and I had all these issues moving to the new city, dealing with a panic disorder since I was 16. So when my certain triggers would arise and flare up, I pretty much shut down. I could not control myself. I could not control my life. So I finally one day had to realize that I'm an adult, I'm in control of myself. So once I got that packed down, then I knew how to help other people. Because you can't have a broken social worker, you can't have a broken friend, you can't have a broken caregiver and expect them to help you, because that doesn't work. That's not how it's ever going to work, because you need somebody with a clear mindset. You need somebody that has themselves together. It's not saying that everybody's perfect, because I will never admit that in my life, but certain people can still maintain a proper lifestyle with personal choices. So for me, for example, I still continue to drink. I still continue to go out on weekends. I'm not going to deny that in any way. But When I do those things, I accept full responsibility for my actions and I know what to expect the next day. So when I wake up the next day, I feel sick, I feel anxious, I feel like I'm having a heart attack. Typical panic symptom is feeling like you're dying. So when I choose to do those things, that is the outcome. So that's kind of what I'm getting here. You need to know your triggers because triggers are very important to know so you know how to control yourself because if you don't know your triggers, you're really not gonna have yourself together. So continuing on, triggers we're talking about today. What else? A crisis. Crisis. I'm gonna touch base with a little bit. So dealing with a crisis. So when you're dealing with a crisis, either it's about someone getting really angry and lashing out, if it's a homeless crisis, if it's a addiction crisis, you have to find the appropriate people with these situations because not everybody, especially people that have never took social work, do not know how to deal with a crisis situation because they might think they do. They might think just because they've either been there, done that, or they have experienced them before in the past, they know how to fully deal with a crisis situation, which I'm going to tell you is incorrect. Um, Certain things you're taught in school, especially the certifications for applied suicide intervention um, and nonviolent crisis situations. They teach you how to deal with these certain situations in an appropriate manner. So I'm not going to talk too much about that because I've already touched base with that in my previous videos. So crises are a very intense and extreme situations. So when dealing with a crisis, you have to have an open mind. You have to make sure you are the right one for the job before you do the job. But with saying that, if someone's in a crisis, I'm positive mostly everybody can assist people in a crisis. Not saying everyone, but mostly everybody with the right mindset can help assist somebody in a crisis. So, for example, an addiction crisis. Um, if somebody's lost so much touch with reality because of an addiction, that is a crisis. Somebody that uses drugs frequently with children is considered a crisis. Somebody that spends all their money on drugs is considered a crisis. So, when dealing with a crisis situation, you have to make a plan. You have to make a care plan. Anybody can make a care plan. All you have to do is write what you want out of the care plan, when the date's supposed to be completed by, and who's completing it. It's not that hard. So if you have somebody that you know that is suffering from addiction crisis, um, and you're concerned and you don't feel like it's your duty or you could be able to assist the person. That's why they have crisis workers. That's why they have crisis centers. I don't know in small towns and small cities if they have crisis centers. I'm sure they would. Or the hospital would have a department in crisis. Doctors are all trained for crisis situations. Nurses, social workers, they're all trained for crisis situations. So, when dealing with a crisis, the main thing you have to remember, the last thing I'm going to discuss in this video about crisis situations is you have to go in with an open mind. You have to stay calm for the person that's in the crisis. You have to ensure that their needs are being met, not yours. It might sound a little selfish in a way. You might think it's selfish, but that person's in the crisis. You are not in the crisis. So you have to ensure they're going to get out of the crisis, and you're not going to put yourself in one, and then you're both going to be in one. So next thing to talk about today, I talked about crisis. I've talked about triggers. I think I'm going to touch base with overcoming addiction because a lot of people that I've known in the past that have had severe addictions have overcome them. And that is one of the most greatest things and accomplishments anybody can do in life. It's a bigger accomplishment than graduating college. It's bigger than university. It's bigger than getting married, even because of the fact that you had the power to get off a substance and become clean. I feel that is a very big accomplishment in society, because there are people in society that suffer from addiction, suffer from mental health, suffer from homelessness and all these other things, and they don't ever get out of it. They can't, sometimes you can't get out of it. So for you to overcome an addiction is a very big accomplishment, just like someone overcoming anxiety, someone overcoming homelessness, some mental disorders, some homeless situations, some addictions are unpreventable. So, for somebody that's addicted to a substance, say it's heroin, cocaine, ecstasy, methamphetamine, it's a very big accomplishment. It's this is how I look at it. When you start at the line here as an addict, way down here. My hand's way too close to this camera. People can't see me properly. So when you're at the first of the start and you're addicted, I consider that your past. And then how do you see yourself now? Either you're still suffering from addiction, you're getting over it, or you're just kind of managing. So you have to still make a plan, and how are you going to get better? Do you want to get better? Who's going to help you get better? So once you get to the future, I hope that everybody suffering from addiction will be off the drugs, but don't consider yourself a bad person, or don't consider yourself an addict, because I don't like calling people addicts, because I find it's very self-determinate. What's that word? Self-lowering, like your self-esteem and stuff. So like, if you do use drugs, I don't consider people an addict. I can say that you suffer from a drug problem, because it is a problem to me. It might not be a problem to you, but if you are addicted to drugs, that is considered a problem. So a recreational use to me, and especially after taking my school, I don't consider it a problem. As long as you don't make it a problem, there's certain times to do it, there's certain places to do it, so in different situations. So I'm not encouraging anybody to do drugs anyways. So as I was getting back to, once you get to the future, you need to hopefully be off the drugs, have a plan how to stay off the drugs. It gets back to when I was first talking about triggers. What are your triggers to doing drugs? What triggers can you avoid so you don't relapse? So when you're dealing with somebody with an addiction, the worst thing you can do is call them an addict, I find, because they don't like it. The person saying it don't want to hear it, so it's just better if you don't say it at all. I feel that when dealing with someone with an addiction, they are stuck, but also so are you. Because you don't want to say the wrong thing to them, because then they might not want to speak to you anymore. They might go off, they might hurt themselves, they might continue their ways and later on hurt themselves. It's better if you nag it in the butt right there. So dealing with addiction is just like dealing with homelessness. It's just like dealing with crisis situations. It's just like dealing with triggers. It all relapses. I mean, not relapses. It all relates in the same circle. So, when you're dealing with any situation in social work, anytime, any place with anybody, you cannot. First of all, you have to put the client first. I can't come in with my problems and relate to your problems, tell you, oh, I've been there in this situation with this person, because then I'm becoming the client. That is not why we're hired. That is not what we're there for, because once we start becoming the client, how is that helping you? So you're just hearing another story from another human being rather than the support that you need. So my biggest advice for social workers is not to become the client. I know how hard it is sometimes, but you need to have that professional barrier. You have to ensure you're the social worker, not the client. Professional ethics and professionalism is taught in the school. I find it a very important course because it teaches you what not to do and what to do. You, as a person, can decide if you want to do those things, but once you start breaking ethics and professionalism, not very many people are going to want to hire you, and you're going to waste a whole bunch of money in college or university. So, that is probably it with this video. Now, of course, I'm gonna say at the end of this video, if you are struggling with addiction and mental health, I recommend going to seeing your doctor or your social worker and seeing what they can do to help you. Now, I will leave some links at the bottom of this video for organizations that deal with mental health and addiction. Now, of course, if it's an emergency, you have to call the nearest emergency department or 911. So I have to say that just because I've been talking about this. So please, if you're in a crisis or something like that, there are people that can help you. So don't think that everybody that's working in social work has not experienced it, because they have. So just please remember, the next time you're in a crisis, there is supports to help you. There are people there to help you. Thanks.